So Golden Boy Promotions and Miguel Cotto announced that they've entered into a multi-fight deal together. And this comes on the heels, of course, of the promotion for Miguel Cotto's fight against Yoshihiro Kamagai that's taken place August 26th here in Los Angeles at StubHub Center. More about that in a second, but I want to do a quick video here just talking, just giving my opinions on this, because a lot of you have asked about why would Golden Boy do a deal with Miguel Cotto, who's basically been kind of one foot out the door for a few years now, right? His last fight was in November of 2015, where he was decisively defeated by Canelo Alvarez. There's a little bit of controversy from some diehard Cotto fans about that fight. I was ringside. I could tell you that Canelo easily won, okay? But Cotto hasn't fought since then. And even before that, he only fought once in 2013, once in 2014. So he's been one of these fighters like a Manny Pacquiao and some others from that generation who've kind of been just holding on, fighting only for the money, really going through the motions, almost passionless the last few years. So why would Golden Boy enter into a deal with him? Well, they're calling this a partnership. This is actually not Cotto giving full promotional control to Golden Boy Promotions and signing exclusively with them. It's kind of a partnership where Golden Boy is going to co-promote Cotto's next few fights, however many fights, for however long he wants to go on. But they're also going to work with Cotto's stable of young prospects. I guess he has a few young prospects to his own promotional company. And they're even going to do some of these Golden Boy on ESPN cards from Puerto Rico and try to revitalize the scene there, because, boxing in Puerto Rico has always been a big thing, but it's kind of died off the last few years. Some of the newer prospects that have been coming up just kind of plateaued. You look at Felix Verdejo and some other guys, right? You go back to the 90s, the early 2000s, the scene was just a lot more vibrant in Puerto Rico. So part of this deal together, and I think it's smart business from both sides, is to supposedly revitalize some of the boxing scene there in Puerto Rico, because if there's a vibrant scene in Puerto Rico and those fighters turn from prospects to contenders to champions and they come to the United States to fight, that's good for the sport in America. And of course, all of this is part of the promotion for the Cotto Kamagai fight, which when it was first signed, look, there was a big groan from a lot of boxing fans. And look, I groaned myself. And a lot of us in the media were kind of like, ugh, who cares? But the more I'm thinking about this fight, the more I'm actually starting to warm up to it. And I'm kind of excited to cover it. Look, August 26th, here in Los Angeles, StubHub Center. The weather's going to be great. And these tickets for this fight are priced well. Golden Boy is doing the smart thing, and they're pricing the tickets right. They're anywhere from $25 to $200 for ringside. That's good. That's a good price to watch a fight live, to see a first ballot Hall of Famer. And here's the thing. For West Coast boxing fans, Cotto, for most of them, this will be their first chance to see him, because he's only fought in LA once. And that was in a 6-pro fight back in 2001. It was on the undercard of the Roy Jones-Julio Cesar Gonzalez fight. I don't know if you guys remember that. Back in 2001, and it was just a 6-rounder. It was Cotto's 6th pro fight. Also on that card, Eric Morales fought Injin Chi. Remember him? And Ricardo Mayorga fought on that card. Mia St. John. That was at Staples Center. So the fact that they're putting this in StubHub as opposed to a big venue like Staples Center, a more intimate venue like StubHub, it makes sense. And I think that they can do a good crowd there. Of course, they got to put some good, fighters on the undercard. A strong co-main would help. But Golden Boy has a stable of fighters that they want to keep busy, their prospects that they can stack that card with. And of course, we'll probably see some Mexican versus Puerto Rican prospect type matchups on that card. Makes a lot of sense. So all things being considered, and then the fact that it's not an HBO pay-per-view, which the original fight, Cotto's original fight, I think was supposed to take place in June through Rock Nation Promotions. That was going to be a pay-per-view. Now this is on regular HBO. And some of you might not like that, but I actually think this fight will be more competitive than you're thinking, okay? Yoshihiro Kamagai is a badass. He always brings it. And as I said a minute ago, Cotto hasn't been very active. He's got one foot out the door. This fight will be at 154 pounds. Forget about the title. It's a worthless, vacant title. It's the actual title that Canelo vacated to finally move up to middleweight to fight Gennady Golovkin. So it's a 154-pound title. And for some people that matters, but it really, really doesn't. I think the matchup will actually be fun because I don't think Cotto has the power to really hurt Kamagai, at least at this stage of his career. That guy can really take a punch. I don't think Kamagai has the power to really hurt Cotto that bad. So what I see are some heated exchanges going back and forth. And I've covered several Kamagai fights here in the Los Angeles area at different venues. He has a fan contingency out here. He's got some fans that will show up. It's going to be a real international flavor in the crowd at StubHub that night. So, look, I think that this is a fun matchup. And I think it's actually going to be a good card once they get all the undercard fights together. It should be fun. Now, people are asking, okay, what comes next? All things being considered, Cotto is still the favorite to win that fight. And he should be. Even this faded, disinterested, cashing in version of Cotto is still so much more skilled than Kamagai. He should win that fight. So assuming he does, and there's no major injuries, okay, what's next? Well, look at Golden Boy's stable of fighters, right? Depending on how Cotto looks, if he looks really good, if he looks rejuvenated in this fight, possibly they're talking about a fight between him and David Lemieux, which I think would be hella fun. Here's the thing though, is that going to be at a catchweight? I don't see Cotto wanting any part of David Lemieux at the full middleweight limit of 160 pounds. So then the catchweight stuff starts to come into play and people are going to be mad at that. But if they can find a catchweight, maybe it's 158 pounds, somewhere in there, if Lemieux can actually make that weight comfortably, you know, maybe it drains him just enough to make that fight a little more fun, a little more competitive. I'm not saying that's a pay-per-view main event. I'm not saying that. But it's an HBO championship boxing main event, right? I don't think Lemieux would kill himself to go all the way down to 154 and fight for this title that Cotto is going to hold. I don't see that happening. But maybe somewhere in the middle they could fight, and that's a fun matchup, man. Now, some of you have talked about the winner between Canelo and Golovkin. Should it be Golovkin fighting Canelo? Look, whoever wins that fight, that's not an opponent for Cotto at this stage, okay? I think at this stage, number one, I don't see Canelo or Golovkin going below 160 to fight Cotto. And I don't see Cotto going all the way up to 160 to fight them. And I think at this stage of his career, those two guys stop Cotto. Definitely Golovkin stops him. Probably Canelo stops him. So get that noise out of your head. A David Lemieux fight, though? Possible. It's possible. Especially, you know, look, that fight makes sense in New York, Madison Square Garden. Even if it's next June around the Puerto Rican Day Parade or something like that, you know, I'm thinking long term here. It's possible. I don't think Cotto's going to Montreal or anything, but in New York, in that area, you know, the Montreal fan contingency, they could come down to New York. It makes a lot of sense. But there's other possibilities. Look, if Cotto struggles against Kamagai and barely gets by, Golden Boy has prospects that they could try to, and look, I'm thinking long-term again, a year or so down the road, that they could try to build up against Cotto. Look, you got guys like Yamaguchi Falcao, who's a junior middleweight prospect, I think it's 13-0. You got Rashidi Ellis, who's a welterweight prospect, 18-0. Jason Quigley, middleweight prospect, 13-0. Those are all long shots, I get it. But if they're fighting on this undercard, maybe, nothing's official, nothing like that. But I'm just saying, if they get him on a couple undercards or something, get those fighters on an undercard, maybe you could build something up a year or so down the road, depending on how long Cotto wants to fight. Again, just brainstorming here, okay? Those are long shots. What I think is more of a possibility is looking at some of the guys Top Rank has. And you know that Golden Boy and Top Rank are friendly. They've done business together in recent years. Everything's copacetic between those guys. Let's not forget about Timothy Bradley. Let's not forget about Juan Manuel Marquez. Those are two very, very possible matchups for Cotto. Should he beat Kamagai and grab that title? Fighters love titles. It makes fights more marketable to casual fans. And look, for Marquez to move up to 154 possibly, or some kind of catch weight at junior middleweight, which I could see happening, to fight for that title that Cotto has, to get another title in another weight class, even though we all know it's bullshit, for him it'd be some kind of history. That's a possibility. Same thing with Tim Bradley. The problem with those matchups, if they happened, they would be pay-per-view. So, you know, hey, some of the fights I mentioned a second ago, some of you are probably laughing at me and saying, screw that, it would never happen. But those fights would be on regular HBO. These fights against Marquez, Bradley, they would be on pay-per-view. So pick your poison there, okay? But also, you know, look, some of you have talked about a Manny Pacquiao rematch. Of course, they fought in 2009 at a catchweight. I can't remember if it was 144, 145, something like that. It was a welterweight fight. This, of course, would be a junior middleweight fight. I wouldn't be interested in that. We've already seen it once, but there are people out there who would be interested in it. I think it would be a long shot, but look, this is boxing. Crazier things have happened. Maybe down the line, a Cotto-Pacquiao rematch could happen. I don't see it just because, you know, the same trainers, same gym, all that stuff. I think it's too much drama. And I just think the egos are too big. You know, the egos involved would be too big. The divas on both sides of that, I don't see it working. So I wouldn't even entertain that. Mike Alvarado, who just fought in Chicago last week, who is trying to stay busy, build himself back up, and work himself into another title fight. Again, I get it. He'd have to move up in weight. I get it. On paper, it wouldn't look competitive. I'm just saying this is boxing. Crazier things have happened. I'm brainstorming here. A couple of you have talked about Terence Crawford. I don't see that fight happening just because Terence Crawford would have to move up 2 weight classes to fight Cotto. It's possible, it's within the realm of possibility, but like a lot of these other matchups I'm calling out here, it's a long shot. And I don't see what's in it for Terence Crawford. If he goes in there and can't knock out a faded Miguel Cotto and it's kind of a boring technical 12-round fight, does that help Crawford build his brand? For Cotto to lose to a much smaller fighter in dominant fashion, which I feel he would against Crawford, does that help him at all? Does it make him that much money to make it worth it? I don't see that happening. Now, some of you have asked on Twitter about Cotto. Does this mean he could possibly fight, you know, what about Keith Thurman? What about Errol Spence? What about the Charlos? Guys, now that he's associated with Golden Boy Promotions, no way. If he stayed solo and was just Miguel Cotto Promotions and all that, possibly. Although I don't think he would take those fights. Not that Cotto ducks anybody, but that would end very badly for him. I think he'd go the distance with Keith Thurman, but I think the Charlos would really, really hurt him. And I think that Spence would knock him out too. So not that he'd even entertain those fights at this point in his career, because I don't think he would, but nothing in the PBC universe is remotely possible for Cotto. So depending on what we see in August against Kamagai, we'll be able to kind of gauge where Cotto will go from there. Is he going to be a guy that helps build up some of these younger Golden Boy fighters and be that kind of, I'm not going to say gatekeeper. Cotto's got too much of an ego and he's too proud to do that, and he's too good of a fighter for that, right? If he really struggles against Kamagai, he might just call it quits. But if he looks great against Kamagai, and it's on regular HBO, and it's a great, great fight that gets people buzzing about Cotto again, don't be surprised if you start hearing the names Juan Manuel Marquez, Timothy Bradley. That's easy to make because of the networks. It's easy to make because of the promoters involved. It's also easy to make and makes sense for the fighters because they get paid money. And I don't think any of them get hurt in that scenario. Because of the weights, the sizes, the stages of their career that they're in, I don't think there's a knockout in those fights. So it's marketable. Nobody really gets hurt. Everyone comes away unscathed, makes money. I think that would be the direction that they want to go. But all things considered, I like this business. I think it makes smart business here. This decision by both sides, it works out. The thing with Rock Nation, they guaranteed way too much money for Cotto. And they kind of had to partially buy him out, right? This fight against Kamagai was supposed to be the third fight of his deal. And originally he was supposed to fight other guys, and they fell through, and there's all these issues. So Rock Nation partially paid him out, bought him out of his deal. And then Cotto's getting the other chunk of that guarantee from Golden Boy. And then his own promotional firm is putting up some of the money. So he's still coming out ahead in this fight against Kamagai. And then going forward, there's so many options. I just talked about a bunch of them. Whether they make a lot of sense or not that much sense, there's a lot of options. So I think this is smart business. And I do think that if you were like on the fence about going to that fight for Kamagai in August, I think it's worth it, man. For the ticket price, this is probably, if you're a West Coaster, this is your last chance to see the guy fight in Los Angeles. For a lot of you, it's the only chance you've ever had to see him live. So I think it makes sense to buy that. And I think that Golden Boy, I've heard about some of the possibilities of who they're going to put on that card. Nothing's official, but if some of the fights come together that I've heard rumored, or some of the fighters that will be on it, I think it makes a lot of sense. It'll be a lot of fun. Let me know what you guys think. Does this reinvigorate your interest in Miguel Cotto, or are you still just, are you over it? Let me know what you think.